Today I'll be going over part 9 of Larry Geller's book, Unchained Melody. May 2nd, 1977, the Arlington Hilton, Chicago. Larry says Elvis gave a powerful performance that night, which was a huge relief considering everything he was battling. Afterward at the hotel, Larry privately turned to someone close to Elvis, hoping he could speak honestly about his concerns. He doesn't say who it is, so let's just call him John Doe. John Doe was sitting in his room sipping on a drink. Larry and John Doe made small talk, and then Larry said, "There's something that's really troubling me, and I'm sure you're aware of what I'm about to say." John Doe said, "Sure, what's bothering you?" Larry said, "I'm worried about Elvis. He's more sick. I'm afraid that something is going to happen. It's obvious in his performances that something is wrong. I want to know if you're aware of it." John Doe had a puzzled look on his face, then said, "Larry, you're being negative. The problem is that you just don't understand. Let me explain it to you. It's very simple. See, if you were an entertainer, you'd see it, because performers, especially singers, stay younger than other people. They get rejuvenated from their audiences. You'll see, in 20 years, Elvis will be 62, and he'll look better than he does today. He won't age. You and everyone else will, but Elvis will be on that stage singing, looking great. I know he's a little overweight and he's been ill, but don't worry yourself. It'll only make you older." John Doe chuckled, then said, "Nothing can happen to Elvis." Larry was shocked and left to go back to his room. Larry writes, quote, "I am writing down the conversation I just had. I'm flabbergasted, angry, frustrated, and distressed. Am I losing my mind? No one is going to age? No one can become desperately ill? I am writing down this outrageous discussion not only to capture in words how Elvis's closest associates are blind and do not perceive or relate to his worsening condition, but I must also hold on to myself and maintain my own center. A few members of the group admit he's ill. I can speak to Ed, who realizes the seriousness of the situation, only his hands are tied, and he is unable to be effective. Those around Elvis who have any authority seem not to understand what appears to have become a moment-to-moment life and death crisis." End quote. May 4th, 1977, Graceland. Larry says they flew back to Graceland after the Saginaw show. They were exhausted from the long tour and ready to finally rest. Elvis was still asleep when Larry had to leave for a 6:30 flight back to Los Angeles, so he left a message with Charlie. He was at the Memphis airport about to check in for his flight when he suddenly heard his name paged. Surprised, he picked up a courtesy phone to see who was calling. "Lawrence?" Larry said. "Elvis, good heavens, man, I didn't expect to hear your voice." Elvis said, "Lawrence, where the hell do you think you're going?" Larry told him, "I left a message with Charlie and my plane leaves at 6:30. Elvis laughed and said, "You're not going anywhere." Larry said, "Elvis, I need to get back to LA to see my family and do some writing before the next tour." Elvis said, "No way, son. I'll have them stop the plane if I have to. You're coming back to Graceland. You can leave in a day or two. I need you to do something. My hair, and we can have some time to talk." Larry was back in Elvis's bedroom 35 minutes later, where Elvis grinned and said, "There's no escaping, Larry, so you might as well accept it." He and Elvis spent a quiet evening relaxing, talking, and watching videos. Elvis then put off getting his hair done until the next day, which Larry felt was Elvis's clever way of keeping him in Memphis. Larry was exhausted and wanted to return to LA, but part of him was glad Elvis asked him to stay. Even when he was tired, time with Elvis still felt special. He went into Elvis's room late the next night and found him sitting by the bathroom mirror, feet up, with books nearby and a large bottle of spring water he'd been drinking lots of lately. Elvis's eyes were red and swollen, and he said, "My eyes are killing me. I think what you'd better do is cut the sides of my hair so that when I'm moving on stage, it doesn't get caught in the sweat and catch the corner of my eyes. That's probably one of the reasons they're so screwed up." During the haircut, Elvis, very concerned, asked, "Am I losing any on top? Is it getting thinner?" Larry writes, quote, "As I examined the crown area, I couldn't stop thinking about how any physical deterioration is inevitably reflected by hair loss. Judging Elvis's agitated state, though, I decided this wasn't the thing to say." End quote. Larry carefully said, "Elvis, just the very top. It's not as strong as it used to be. It's a little weaker, but don't be alarmed. When this starts, it's usually gradual and takes years to become noticeable." Elvis suddenly bent forward to look at the spot himself, and Larry had to quickly pull the scissors back so he wouldn't accidentally cut him. Elvis groaned. "What the hell am I going to do?" Larry told him, "Don't worry, it's only very slight. That's why I always massage your scalp, and it's helped. You've got a beautiful full head of hair. I add those special ingredients to your shampoos, but you also know that the most important single element for healthy hair is good nutrition." Then Elvis interrupted. All right, I get it, Lawrence. Just do your thing and make it look as good as possible. And trim my sideburns. They're too bushy." Larry says Elvis was quiet while he worked on his hair. Elvis kept studying himself in the mirror carefully, almost like he was judging every detail of his appearance. It reminded Larry of seeing Elvis do the same mirror-checking ritual back in the mid-60s. Even then, Elvis studied every angle and tiny flaw, though at that time there were hardly any. Elvis knew he was good looking, but he didn't come across as vain or self-absorbed like many other stars Larry had seen. Elvis saw that Larry was watching. Larry said, "You know, Elvis, if we didn't keep dyeing your hair, it would definitely get healthier. You're almost all white like your daddy. You would look so dynamic. Can you picture yourself in one of your show suits with long, flowing white hair? It would be classic." Elvis didn't say anything at first, then he laughed and said, "LG, you're something else. Nah, right now I think a change like that would be too drastic, but I'll give it some thought." May 20th, 1977, Stokely Athletic Center, Knoxville, Tennessee. Larry says they flew into Knoxville for the start of a 14-day tour, but Elvis already looked completely worn out, as if he'd reached the end before it had even begun. Elvis looked physically shaky, and Larry could see in his eyes that he was afraid he might not be able to pull it off. Larry stood beside Elvis backstage and quietly said something that, looking back, he realized was the wrong thing to say. Larry said, "Elvis, tell me something. How do you do it? How do you get on stage and perform feeling the way you do?" Elvis said, "Larry, a man has to meet the occasion no matter what it is and do what he has to do. I'm just doing what I was born to do." Then Elvis smiled, bowed his head, and brought his hands together like he was praying. Then he said his usual nightly salutation before going on stage. Elvis stepped through the curtain into the packed auditorium with flashbulbs going off everywhere. Fans rushed to the stage with flowers, cards, letters, teddy bears, and gifts for him and Lisa Marie. All the while, the crowd screamed with excitement. He was wearing his bright white jeweled suit and worked the stage with confidence. He let the crowd admire him standing in the spotlight and soaking up their cheers. Larry writes, quote, "Elvis, we love you," banners hung from the balcony. Someone yelled out, "Elvis, you're the king!" And he rose again and met the occasion. After a few songs, I looked up at Elvis from where I was kneeling at stage left and was astonished to see his face radiant, the puffiness and pain gone. He had come back to life for now. He came toward me and gave me a look that said, "Don't ask me. All I know is what I have to do. The rest is grace from above." May 21st, 1977, Louisville, Kentucky. They were in town for Elvis's next show. Elvis was in the bedroom of his suite with Dr. Nick, and Larry was waiting to see Elvis as soon as they were done. Someone suddenly pounded on the door, which startled Larry. When he looked through the peephole, he saw it was Tom Parker, so he opened the door. Parker leaned heavily on his cane, and he looked around the room and said, "Where is he?" Larry headed toward the bedroom door and said, "Colonel, I'll let him know you're here." Parker brushed past Larry and said, "No, I'm going in." Larry writes, quote, "He threw open the bedroom door, and in the instant before it closed behind him, I caught a glimpse of the heartbreaking scene inside. There was Dr. Nick kneeling next to the bed, holding up Elvis's unconscious body and working frantically to revive him. He kept dunking Elvis's head into a bucket of ice water. Eyes closed, jaw slack, Elvis looked helpless, as if he were in a coma. I could hear him moaning faintly. The door slammed shut." End quote. Larry says a couple of minutes later, Parker came out angry, and he made his priorities very clear. Pointing his cane up in the air, Parker said, "The only thing that's important is that he's on that stage tonight. Nothing else matters. You hear me? Nothing else." Then he left. Larry was shocked by Parker's cold reaction. He had expected him to show concern or do something to help Elvis, especially seeing him in such bad shape. And he wondered if Parker only cared about Elvis's ability to perform, not Elvis's well-being. Dr. Nick left the bedroom, and Elvis called out, Lawrence, are you there?" Larry rushed in and saw Elvis sitting in bed, sweaty and bloated. Larry asked him how he was doing, and with a big sigh, Elvis said, "I feel whipped like a fondue." Elvis was clearly annoyed and asked, "Larry, why did you let that son of a bitch barge in on me?" Larry said, "Elvis, I told him I would let you know he was here, but he just stormed right by me and came in." Elvis was angry now and said, "Hey, I don't care who he thinks he is. This is my effing ball game, not his. He can't walk his big fat ass into my room like that, manager or not. Lawrence, what I'm about to tell you is top secret, and I don't want you to tell anyone, but..." Then Charlie knocked on the door and walked in, and Elvis had him sit down. Elvis said, "I'm going to get rid of the old colonel. I need a change, new blood. I've always been loyal to the colonel, and I appreciate what he's done. But nothing can last forever. The times are a-changin', and I don't think the colonel is up to date with what's going on like Tom Hewlett. I've had it with him. I want a different lifestyle. I don't want the Memphis Mafia anymore." Elvis said he was fed up with the people and drama around him. He wanted a cleaner, calmer life and felt he finally knew who his real friends were. Elvis said he respected Parker's talent, but he was frustrated and suspicious. Elvis couldn't understand why Parker kept blocking him from touring Europe and the world. Elvis also felt Parker had held him back with more serious movie roles. Elvis believed he could do more, but felt trapped by touring and planned to get rid of Parker in September after honoring his current contracts. He believed Vernon would be happy about him cutting ties with Parker. Vernon had been warning him for a long time that too many people were taking advantage of him. Elvis told Larry and Charlie which guys in the entourage would be let go, but promised them to secrecy. Then Elvis said, "When we get to Hawaii, Larry, we're going to stay there long enough to recharge my battery and get my health back. I'm shot. Believe me, no one knows it better than me. I don't care how long it takes. I'll tell you what else we're going to do. We'll see all the great movies on video. Whatever we can get our hands on and figure out what kind of movie will be right for me to re-enter the game. When we get back to Hollywood, we'll start up our own production company and hire a great screenwriter. And when the time's right, I'm going to have a talk with Tom Hewlett about being my manager." May 27, 1977, Binghamton, New York. Larry says most of the entourage were lounging in the living room at the hotel when Elvis emerged from his bedroom looking pensive. He said, "Well, Ginger and I need a rest from each other. That's why I sent her home for a few days." Then he became angry and said, "Actually, she'd better think things over very carefully and choose between me and her whole damn family. She's still young, but she'd better grow up a little faster or there'll be no wedding." So in Ginger's book, she says the reason Elvis sent her home was because she brought up her concern about his pill use. Anyway. Around 2 a.m., Larry was in Elvis's room and Dr. Nick brought Elvis his usually nightly packet. Elvis was hurting physically and emotionally and seemed to be very depressed. Elvis said to Larry, "I'm glad Ginger's back in Memphis." He sighed then. "It has to be that way right now, but damn, I can't sleep alone. I need someone next to me. I just need some companionship. I can't be alone tonight. Call Joe in here. Maybe he can figure something out." Larry called Joe, who showed up a few minutes later, half asleep and in his robe, asking what was up. Elvis told him, "Joe, I need someone. I can't sleep alone. I need someone in bed with me. Can you find someone? What about calling Mindy Miller? I'll have her flown in if I have to charter a damn plane out." Joe gave a little laugh and said, "Elvis, it's almost 3 a.m. What you're asking me to do is a project. I'll get on it tomorrow, Elvis, but there's no way I can get you someone now." Elvis said, all right. Only I do need someone." As Joe walked out, he said, "Elvis, I'll check into it when I get up." Elvis was down and said, "Lawrence, what am I going to do?" Larry said, "I have an idea, Elvis. Kathy Westmoreland." Elvis's face lit up. You're right, Kathy." Larry says Elvis's eyelids began to hang as the medication took effect. Elvis said, "Call Kathy for me and explain the situation and get her up here." Larry called her and it sounded like he had woken her up. He told her, "It's Larry. I'm sitting here with Elvis and he asked me to call you because he wants to see you now." She told him to give her 20 minutes to get dressed and ready, but Larry interrupted her and said, "Kathy, listen, don't bother with that. Just put on your bathrobe and come up to our floor right now. I'll meet you at the elevator and explain everything." He met Kathy 5 minutes later and told security she was with Elvis's show so she could come upstairs. As they walked away, the officers gave him suggestive looks, clearly assuming something else was going on. Larry says he explained to Kathy that Elvis needed her for emotional support, not anything sexual. He also reassured her that he would protect her privacy and make sure no one misunderstood the situation. Elvis was groggy by then, but happy to see her, and Larry said goodnight. Larry wrote in his journal that night, quote, "Elvis decided that for the time being, Kathy would stay with him and travel with us on tour. The next day, she confided in me. 'Larry,' she said with a concerned look on her face, 'Elvis made some remarks last night after you left, and I'm really worried about him.' She lowered her voice so that we wouldn't be overheard. 'He was talking about himself, about the changes he's been through, and suddenly he said, Kathy, I know I look fat now, and I'll look terrible for my TV special coming up, but I'll tell you this, I'll look good in my casket.'" May 29, 1977, Baltimore Civic Center, Baltimore. Larry says it was clear before the show that Elvis was not okay. He was quiet, slurring his words, and exhausted and struggled just to get ready. Elvis kept his eyes closed while Larry was styling his hair, and when he spoke, he sounded weak. Elvis said, "Larry, my body hurts. My leg is killing me. My throat feels raw. Man, I'm a wreck. Before I get up, please just put your hands on me. I need some extra energy." Larry wrote, quote, "When he went on stage at the Civic Center, 13,000 people cheered wildly. Elvis was desperately ill. His eyes were swollen, his body movements lethargic, and the more effort he put forth to get in gear for that old magic to transform him and bring him to life, the worse it got. As he sang, he slurred his words. He struggled to stay on his feet, his body swaying." End quote. Larry was kneeling on stage left when he saw a man shake his head and say, "Man, that boy's plain drunk." Larry says Elvis was so weak he seemed close to collapsing. Instead of continuing, Elvis bought himself a break by saying, "There's a lot of talent on the stage tonight, and I'd like Cheryl Nielsen to sing to you one of my favorite songs, Danny Boy." Elvis quietly slipped off stage during Danny Boy and went back to his dressing room with the help of security. The audience had no idea anything was wrong, and Charlie stayed on stage to stall and cover for him. Larry says Charlie handled the crisis incredibly well, and he was very proud of him. Even though Charlie didn't know if Elvis could come back on stage, he calmly kept the show going by bringing on Kathy for a solo and J.D. Sumner and the Stamps for a couple of gospel songs. Larry wrote, quote, backstage in the dressing room, Dr. Nick did his best to revive Elvis. 30 minutes later, Elvis emerged from the dressing room looking refreshed and pumped up to finish the show. As we walked by his side, he whispered to me, just send me some energy so I can finish the show and get the hell out of here. Man, I hurt bad. When Elvis finally came back on stage, the crowd exploded with applause and stomping. Elvis apologized to the audience for what had happened and joked, hey, when you gotta go, you gotta go. Larry says the audience cheered and they could tell Elvis wasn't well, but they showed him love instead of judgment. Their cheers were a way of telling him they cared. When Elvis turned around to drink some water, he muttered, man, sometimes it hurts so effing bad. He finished the show seated on a stool, singing and playing guitar. Even though he was clearly sick, he gave the audience everything he could, and they loved him even more for it. June 1977. Larry writes, quote, a couple of psychics were in the news predicting Elvis's death, and the press had picked up a few leaks from the bodyguard's book. Elvis's appearance and bizarre behavior only intensified speculation. Sadly, there was little to rebut the rumors. Though Elvis's voice rarely wavered, there were nights when everything else betrayed the truth. He was a very sick man, end quote. Tom Parker had arranged for CBS to film Elvis during his next 10-day Midwest tour. The taping would happen in late June, but Elvis didn't put a lot of thought into it. Once he finally focused on it, though, he became extremely nervous. Larry says Elvis was home in Memphis from June 3rd to the 17th before leaving for what would become the final concert tour of his life. Larry and Elvis were sitting on Graceland's front steps on June 4th, just relaxing and talking. Elvis wore a black jumpsuit and gold sunglasses while fans gathered outside the gates, waving and calling to him as he smiled back. Elvis had his large police flashlight and pointed it down the driveway toward Kathy and Ginger. They were checking out a new white and blue Lincoln Mark V he had bought for Kathy. Elvis said, I'm so lucky to be in the position to give. It's really a gift to give. Then he smiled and said, Lawrence, now it's your turn. I was going to get you a Mark V like Kathy's. Only problem is there's not one new one left in Memphis. I mean, I looked. I wanted you to have a car. Elvis pointed his flashlight toward the other side of the driveway, and Larry saw Billy pull up in a beat-up old car with peeling paint and a badly warped hood. Elvis hung his head and apologized. I'm sorry, Larry. This is all I could get, but at least it has wheels and runs. Larry thought, this has to be a joke. But Elvis and Billy's faces were dead serious, so Larry said, Elvis, that's all right. I appreciate the thought. And the car. Larry writes, quote, Elvis put his hand on my shoulder and gave me one of those deep, sincere looks. But once he caught Billy's eyes, they both exploded with laughter. Ricky drove up in a beautiful new Lincoln Continental Mark V. Speechless, I stood there amazed, and Elvis said, Larry, you gotta admit, it was a perfect setup. I couldn't resist. So this is yours. Check it out. Let's get in. Larry sat in the driver's seat and Elvis sat in the passenger's. Elvis said, Larry, you know I wanted you and Kathy to have these new cars. You deserve it. It's my way of thanking you. It's the least I could do. You know what I've always wanted to do? Tell someone I was going to buy them a new car, and when the car was delivered, the person would get in, and when the motor was turned on, the car would slowly break away. First, the doors would fall off, then the tires, and slowly the whole car would collapse, piece by piece. Elvis laughed, and Larry noticed that it had been weeks since he'd seen Elvis this happy. 2 days later, Larry called Graceland after driving back to L.A. to let Elvis know he made it home safely. But Elvis answered sounding upset and anxious because the CBS taping was getting close. Elvis said, Man, I don't know how the hell I got into this one. It's another one of the Colonel's greedy deals. I guess there's no limit to how he'll use me. I wonder if he's still losing bundles of money in Vegas. I don't know. I don't get it. I guess it comes with the territory. Damn, I've only got a little over a week to drop some weight. I can't imagine how I'll look on camera. They'll all think it's fat. Of all the times he picks for me to face that camera. But I'll tell you this, no matter what, I'll give him their money's worth. Larry suggested Elvis try the liquid diet they had talked about with protein, vitamins, and minerals, hoping it might help him lose a little weight and feel better before the TV taping. Elvis said, Yeah, that's a good idea. Listen, when you come to Memphis, bring me some books about all that. I've got to do something. In the meantime, I'll have them make me those protein shakes. Larry said, I'll bring some books. Best thing you can do now is take care of yourself and relax. I know you. You'll sit up there and worry yourself to death. Elvis said, There are a lot of important things on my mind. It seems that everything hits the fan at once, Larry. To say I'm having second feelings about marrying Ginger is putting it mildly. I don't know whose team she's on. She's not after money, but I do suspect, you know me, I suspect someone's behind it. filling her head with all sorts of things. One minute she's here, and as soon as everything is together, she runs home to Mama and her sisters. That's why it says in the prophet, "For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you." Elvis gave a deep sigh and said, "Damn it to hell, this girl has me on fire. I just hope to God she sees the light before it's too late. All I know is I've got to get some peace and harmony into this situation." Poor Elvis. June 16th, 1977, Graceland. When Larry arrived, Elvis was sitting at his bathroom mirror with the next tour's makeup artists, Aurelia and Shelley. They were there to help with a new issue Elvis was worried about, his eyebrows. Elvis's poor health was thinning his eyebrows. He tried to seem upbeat, but Larry could see he was really hurting inside. Elvis got up and they walked into his bedroom, and Elvis said, "F it. Somehow I'll make it through this damn ordeal. I know how I look. F that. And Red and Sonny's book coming out to get me. F that. My throat hurts. My body's in pain. The TV cameras, the fans, Daddy's sick. I'm worried about Lisa. I've been having crazy, mind-boggling dreams. When I can finally sleep." He sat on his bed and said, "Just be there for me, Lawrence. We've got to meditate every day. I need all God's help I can get. Just stay close at hand. The Almighty is the only solution there is. It just proves that things aren't as they appear. The fans, they don't know my pain. And there are some people here around me who see me every day, yet they don't know what I'm all about. Life's a paradox." Elvis laughed and said, "That's two doxes." Then, after a moment, he said, "It's all part of the master plan. There are some things that can't be explained. Not yet, anyway." Graceland was hectic the next day as everyone rushed to prepare for the tour. Trunks were set out in the den while the guys packed Elvis's costumes. Larry says Vernon came downstairs looking physically weak but emotionally fired up. He seemed angry, like years of things he'd held back were finally coming out. Vernon stopped in front of a photo of Elvis taken during the Aloha special, and everyone turned to him. Vernon said, "I just had a long talk with Elvis. He's plenty hurt and I don't blame him. Don't think my boy doesn't know who his real friends are. Y'all are not fooling anyone around here. You've all had a good thing going here, and Elvis is real hurt. He told me that y'all run away every night and never go in and talk with him, or just plain sit around and listen to what's going on. Y'all supposed to be his friends, and he can't understand why you leave him. He said the only people he feels really care are Larry, Billy, and Charlie. They're the only ones that stay with him or want to be with him and keep him company. Now, sometimes Ed does too, but the rest of you do your job and get the hell out as fast as you can. He's not asking too much, and I'm just giving you some good advice. I know Elvis. He's fed up, and so am I. Gonna be some big changes around here, so you better wake up." June 17th, 1977, Hammond Center, Springfield, Missouri. Larry says Elvis's fifth tour of 1977 was chaotic and overwhelming. Everything blurred together, and Larry only wrote in his diary whenever he could grab a moment between one emergency or another. Elvis was working hard to prepare for the CBS taping in Omaha. It was his first major TV special since Aloha. He knew he looked different and moved slower now, so he was putting extra effort into his performances. Larry says that even with Elvis's struggles, the fans' love for him was still intense. The excitement in the arenas was electric, with crowds stomping and chanting, "Elvis, Elvis." Larry writes, quote, "But the fans' love and hysteria are contrasted with the grim reality that worsens day by day. Elvis is increasingly talking in cryptic terms that have an ominous ring. Last night, just before he was about to walk on stage, he turned to me with quivering lips said, 'I'll give them what they want if it's the last thing I do.' After the show, while he was lying on his bed with a wet towel covering his face, totally exhausted and full of medication, he said hoarsely, 'Now they have something to remember me by. Larry, was it me at my worst?'" Larry says Elvis had been looking back on the past a lot. Before one of the shows, Larry and a few others were sitting with him in his suite along with Vernon. Elvis remembered his childhood, and he talked about how bad his asthma was and how he would remove his shirt and rub his back against trees just to get relief from the itching. Vernon said, "That's right, son, that's right. I haven't thought of that in years." Elvis said, "Daddy, remember back in Memphis when you took me to see my first movie and we couldn't let the church know anything about it?" Vernon was confused and said, "Elvis, that was when we were living in Tupelo." Larry says Vernon didn't say it out loud, but he could tell Elvis's memories were coming out in a confused and unsettling way. Larry says the Lisa Marie taxied into Elvis's reserved spot. The arrival was supposed to be private, but somehow hundreds of fans were already there, causing a huge scene behind the police ropes. At the end of the ramp were media, CBS crews, and airport staff. Larry stood at the plane door watching police try to keep the chaos under control. The crowd suddenly opened up as Tom Parker pushed his way through. Cane in hand and cigar in his mouth, he stormed up the ramp toward the plane and barked, "Larry, where is he?" Larry said, "Hello, Colonel. Elvis is in his bedroom, having his makeup applied." Parker marched through the plane like he owned the place, and everyone immediately paid attention. After briefly going to Elvis's room, he came back out and headed straight for Larry. Parker placed an arm around Larry and said, "Larry, you gotta do an important job tonight. I'm counting on you." Larry could feel Parker breathing on his ear. He was so close. Parker said, "Tonight CBS is filming a very important television special, and I need you to help us. You gotta get Elvis up for this show. Now remember, Larry, make sure his attitude is right. Talk to him. Talk to him. He listens to you. You know how to do it. I know you do. Just make sure he's in good shape psychologically." Larry told him, "Colonel, that's what I always do for Elvis." Larry writes, quote, "As Parker walked back down the ramp, I wish that I had the power he attributed to me. If I had, Elvis would not have been sitting in front of his mirror, anxiously tapping his fingers, watching someone paint on his eyebrows." End quote. The CBS tapings in Omaha on the 19th and Rapid City 2 days later showed both sides of Elvis. Moments of greatness, but also that he was incredibly nervous. Larry says sitting close to where Elvis was, it was clear how nervous he was. Elvis was rolling his eyes, pausing strangely, and speaking in a quiet, anxious way. The fans still loved him completely, and he gave that love back, especially during a powerful and emotional performance of How Great Thou Art. The Rapid City performance became something unforgettable. Elvis sat alone at the piano under a blue light and sang Unchained Melody with a depth and emotion Larry had never heard before. Larry writes, quote, "When I heard him sing the line, 'I'll be coming home, wait for me,' I felt in my heart he was singing to God and to his mother." End quote. Larry says performing was Elvis's life. No matter how much he was struggling, he always left the stage to roaring applause. Elvis often said, "Singing is my life's blood." Elvis was a master performer who knew how to make even a bad moment look magical to the audience, but something caught on camera showed that talent in a heartbreaking way. On stage, Elvis said, "I'm going to actually play the guitar. I know 3 chords, believe it or not. I faked them all for a long time. You may catch me tonight, and if you think I'm nervous, you're right." The crowd applauded, but Larry could see his pain, and Elvis sounded sad. Elvis said, "Gonna do a song called 'Are You Lonesome Tonight?' And I am, and I was." He sang the first 2 verses and then went into his monologue. He said, "I wonder if you're lonesome tonight. You know, someone said the world's a stage and each of us play a part. Fate." Elvis stumbled over his words for a few seconds, but managed to turn it into a joke by finishing with plus text. He chuckled and said, "You read your lines so cleverly." Then he stumbled again with cleverly and laughed again and said, "You never missed a cue. Then came Act 2. I forgot the words. You seemed to change, you fool. And why I'll never know why I ever did it." Larry watched in shock, and he says Elvis looked back at him with panic in his eyes, that he knew he was losing control. Then Elvis continued, "Honey, who am I talking to? You lied when you said you loved me. You..." Then Elvis laughed and then said, "And I had no cause to doubt you, but I'd rather go on hearing your lies than living without you. Now the stage is bare, and I'm standing there without any hair. No. And if you don't come back to me, well, to heck with you." Elvis recovered and kept singing, and the audience cheered even louder. They thought it was all intentional, and Elvis was enough of a pro to make it look that way. Larry writes, quote, "I sat there dreading every second, certain the crowd would turn on him. It was so obvious that Elvis was out of it, and yet by laughing in the right places and inserting little asides, he had turned this brief descent into his dark, troubled world into a comedy bit. Elvis never mentioned this incident. Neither did anyone else." End quote. Larry says Elvis was clearly relieved when the tour was finally over. After they returned to Memphis, Larry delayed his flight back to LA so he could see Elvis first. After dinner, he went up to see Elvis around 9, and Elvis seemed unusually distant and withdrawn. Elvis said, "Lawrence, I thought you were going back to LA today." Larry told him, "I wanted to say goodbye in person." Larry was almost done writing his book, and he was launching a hair product line with some friends. Elvis was aware of it, and when Larry asked Elvis if he could call himself Elvis's personal hairstylist, Elvis immediately said, "Of course." Larry writes, quote, "All that was left to do was draw up some legal papers for his signature. I knew that Elvis's handshake was good. His word was always his bond. But my friends were understandably cautious, and when I approached Elvis with their concerns, he understood and offered to get things rolling with his attorney, Ed Hookstratton, in Los Angeles." End quote. Elvis said, "You know, in all the years I've been in showbiz, I've never done a single commercial for anyone's products. I've never lent my name for an endorsement, but I want you to use my name for your book and your products. Just don't tell the Colonel about this. He'll only try to screw it up or grab a piece for himself. Just call Hookstratton, tell him what you need on paper, and I'll sign it." They spent the rest of the night watching Elvis's favorite comedy videos, including Dr. Strangelove and Monty Python. Then they quietly talked for a while. Larry writes, quote, the sicker Elvis became, the more he relied on his cousin Billy, who was always there to tend to his needs. During those last months, Billy was Elvis's anchor, a link with the past, someone who understood what Elvis used to be, what Elvis longed to believe he still was, end quote. Larry says July left him feeling pulled in every direction. He was exhausted and shaken by what he'd seen on tour, but also relieved to be back home in LA and focused on finishing his book plans. He set up a meeting with Ed Hookstratton, then called Elvis at Graceland. He explains that although he took notes from their conversations, they weren't dated, so he presents them in the order they happened. He wrote, quote, this evening I called Graceland, and when Elvis came on the line, he said, LG, good timing. I knew you were going to call tonight. I got the vibes. Earlier, I even told Ginger, I bet Larry calls tonight. So what's happening? Larry told him about the meeting with Hookstratton, and Elvis said, well, I'm sure I'll be getting a call from him after you see him. He'll probably call the colonel too, to check out what this is all about. But don't worry, he's my lawyer. He works for me. And he's only doing his job if he calls the colonel. If the colonel calls me, I'll tell him the way it is. This will tear his old head up. Then Elvis changed the subject. Listen, Larry, I want you to get me a good book on the Holy Shroud of Jesus. I know there's a lot of them. So pick one that you feel really covers the subject. I don't know what it is, but I know there's something there for me. So after you finish your business with Hookstratton, you should be able to come back here by the end of the month. Then we got to get ready for the next tour. One day, Larry was at his desk when Charlie called him and told him Elvis wanted to talk to him. As soon as Elvis got on the line, Larry could read his mood because he heard Elvis ask Charlie to leave him alone for a bit. Elvis told Larry, good God, don't I deserve some happiness from a woman like other people have? Is that asking too much? Man, I'm a human being, There's a real person behind Elvis who has feelings like everyone else. Oh, I know. I realize it's a one-sided love affair. Only I know we're supposed to be together. Son of a bitch, man. You know what she's pushing? To set a date to get married. And I can't be pushed. You know that. No matter how I feel about her, I'm not getting pushed into marriage unless she comes around on her own and stops those damn tactics like she laid on me last night. She said that going on tour bores her and she doesn't know if she's going on the next tour with us. Man, I don't want to make another mistake. Hey, I asked you to marry us, so I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that we're in a holding pattern. Larry said, okay, what about Priscilla? Is there any way you would ever get back together? Elvis said, no way, that's not going to happen. All I care is that takes good care of my baby girl. My love for Lisa comes first. She's number one. I want a family now more than ever. I'd love to have a son. But the point is, and Elvis chuckled and said, I lost the damn point of all this. Oh, the real point I'm getting at is that I've come to realize some hard, cold facts. Certain things I buried within myself go back to when I was a kid. Man, I used to fantasize about everything, about being a star and having money. We were so poor, at least I had my imagination to live off of. I used to fantasize about the things I would do for my folks if I were rich. I made certain promises to myself then, and one of them was to give my mom all the material things in life she never had. Man, I dreamed of showering her with furs, jewelry, homes, you name it. Then Elvis said, I used to see my mom slaving her life away, suffering and struggling. I could tell you stories that would tear your head up. And growing up the way we were, no one was poorer than us. My mom made less than $50 an hour. But in spite of all that, she kept our family together, put food on the table, instilled in me the real basics in life. She literally lived for me. I've told you about this many times, but the point I'm trying to make is, about a year or so later, I was in Germany in the army when it happened. I saw in Priscilla, and I don't know why, certain things that my mama was like. My mom was never educated, but she had a natural way of knowing. She had natural musical abilities, but she could never afford to have lessons. So I put Priscilla in school to educate her. Drama school, etiquette, dance, the whole bit. I was fantasizing. I was trying in my own way to give her what I wanted to give my mom. I wanted Priscilla to take advantage of all the opportunities that my mom was denied. I remember back when I was falling in love with Anne Margaret. You remember, it was serious and I had to make a choice between Anne and Priscilla. What's really strange is that they look so much alike, like they're sisters. But I chose Priscilla. I'll tell you why. I didn't think it would work with Anne and myself. Priscilla wanted to be a mother and raise children. So that's interesting because I don't really think that Priscilla and Anne Margaret look like each other. Elvis got quiet. Then he said, Larry, I think I hear the pitter-patter of Ginger's feet. We got more things to go into, as you can see. So when you finish up with Hookstratton, you can fly back with Lisa, or I'll have to have security fly out and bring her back. I want her here. That effing book will be out any day now. I want to protect her. So do what you got to do and get here with her. I really need you here. That's it for part 9. Stay tuned for part 10, which will be the final video in this series. See you then.